phantom equity. Now, phantom equity is merely an unfunded right of an employer or of an employee or other service provider to receive a percentage of the proceeds, generally upon a company sale, in either an asset deal or a stock transaction. As with everything else we discussed, these rights are often subject to both time and performance vesting requirements. Now, the percentage amount granted to each participant is determined solely by the employer, and they may be different for each participant. Furthermore, different vesting rules, such as the requirement to remain in the active employ of the company on the date that the change in control occurs in order to be vested, both and also being tied to performance vesting if required or desired, can apply to each participant. In each case, the percentage amount of each award will be adjusted to reflect any future dilution incurred by the owner due to the investment by subsequent people or businesses. So therefore, what we can see is that clearly phantom equity is a great way to recruit and retain service providers, because often you're tying them to golden handcuffs until the time that the company is sold. Now, it is interesting to note that the amount of the award to a particular individual can be based on the excess, if any, of any net proceeds from the sale over a certain amount that you determine in your sole discretion at the time of the grant. Now, the certain amount can be your belief, your value, your belief as to what the fair market value of the company is. Now, the beauty of this is that the new service providers or employees who are brought on after the company becomes established will not be able to participate in the growth of the company before they receive the award, which is only fair because they didn't contribute to the growth of the company before the award was granted. Similarly, if an employee or the service provider terminates his or her relationship with the company prior to the sale, but that person retains a vested right to receive a benefit upon the eventual sale of the company, you can draft that particular person's award agreement to say that, well, since you're not around between the time of your termination of service until the time of the sale of the company, you're not going to participate in any growth in the value of that company during that time because you simply didn't contribute towards it. Also, it is also important to note that the proceeds upon which the payments are based can be reduced at your sole discretion to back out a myriad of sales and other expenses. And this is very intriguing, the initial value of any business acquired after the award is granted. For example, if you grant an award to someone with the time the company is worth 10 million, a little ways down the road, you acquire a company for full value cash of 2 million, that employee didn't really add anything to the value of the acquisition. Thus, why should that person participate in any proceeds resulting from that $2 million acquisition? And that is the beauty of phantom equity. You can design it almost any way that you want to employ any additional benefits upon hitting certain performance goals, and at the same time, adjusting the benefit to only reflect the contribution made by the particular employee or other service provider. Certain requirements of law require that equity awards must be based on a arm's length, often third-party determined fair market value determination in order to come up with the exercise price, such as for stock options and stock appreciation rights and profits interests. This is very different from phantom equity, where you as the owner have the complete and unlimited right to choose whatever value that you want, regardless of whether it reflects fair market value, to determine the hurdle that the company must increase its value over for a participant to reap any benefit from the award. The second item to keep in mind is that because an equity award, you are granting equity interests such as stock, you have to deal with certain securities laws exemptions such as Reg D or Rule 701. Now, these items I'm not going to discuss now, but please keep in mind they're cumbersome. They are often difficult to work with, but are totally inapplicable when you're dealing with phantom equity. And lastly, when you're granting equity in any form, be it in restricted stock or profits interests or stock options, etc., you're going to have to draft very detailed shareholders agreements that will contain items such as restrictions on transfer, voting requirements, drag along and tag along rights, and puts and calls. They are complicated, expensive to draft, and cumbersome to deal with when the time comes to have to address it. Lastly, let's discuss the merger and acquisition considerations of phantom equity, and they're all good. Phantom equity allows the seller to present a much cleaner cap table to a purchaser, as there are virtually no small minority equity holders whose interests have to be addressed at the time of the purchase. And even though the purchaser often will require the seller to satisfy the phantom equity obligations, which would have been the same effect as the dilution incurred by the seller when prior equity is granted. Remember, phantom equity payments are often tax deductible, and this often ends up with being a benefit to the purchaser and the seller. Now, this has been a very general description of the various types of equity and phantom equity incentive awards. And as you can see, even though equity-based awards are still in use, and I draft them all the time, for startups and other small companies, I really feel that phantom equity plans are currently the state of the art and will be the future.